We all know how important rookies can be to an NFL franchise and how they can impact winning. So today we talk about the Ravens 2023 draft class and their expectations for their first year in the NFL. All that and more coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in here to another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, and we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here with us, whether you're in video form or audio form, making us your first listen each and every day. We're free and available, all podcasting platforms. And of course, that includes over on YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And of course, we are here for you 5 days a week on Locked On Ravens. So if this is your first time on the channel or listening to the show, if you're an everyday or you listen every day, or if you're somewhere in between, welcome back or welcome in here to our show. And again, daily Ravens news, analysis, updates. If you have a friend or a family member who likes the Ravens or just wants a Ravens perspective on things, be sure to throw them over here our way on Locked On Ravens. But a ton to dive into today. And again, we now have something, an off-season date. The Ravens have had their football school. They're now moving into the next part of off-season workouts, which is voluntary OTAs, where the Ravens will start that today here on May 22nd. And the dates are all over the place, but they will have them today, obviously, but then May 24th and May 25th are the next two, then May 30th, then June 1st and June 2nd, June 5th and 6th, and then June 8th and 9th. So in the final segment, we'll talk about, obviously, Lamar Jackson expectations. Will he be there? Will he not? And just what to expect overall from, the first day and the subsequent days of that. But in the first two segments, I want to talk a bit more about the Ravens rookie class. We did this a bit last week. I handed out official grades, so if you haven't checked that out, highly recommend you do that. We're going to be talking about expectations today for this Ravens rookie class and how it could be a bit different from what the Ravens classes of the past couple of years have been. So in the first segment, we'll talk about first three draft picks. So Zay Flowers, Trenton Simpson, and Tavius Robinson. And then in the second segment, we'll look at the other draft picks and talk about, again, why this could be a different year for the Ravens rookies than it has been in the past couple of seasons. So let's dive right in. Let's first start with Zay Flowers. This is the rookie who I think, for obvious reasons, has the most expectations, the most pressure on him. Not to say that he's going to crack under pressure. I think he's actually going to do very well this year for the Ravens in a role where, again, you can work him in with Odell Beckham Jr., work him in with Rashad Bateman. These are opportunities for Lamar Jackson to now, with the best receiving core he's had in his NFL career by far, it's literally by far, he can now work with Zay Flowers. I think, again, this is a three-level player, short, intermediate, deep game. And someone who I think can make an impact because, again, you have to worry about Odell. You have to worry about Rashad Bateman. You have to worry about Mark Andrews in the run game and obviously Lamar himself. So it's like this is kind of what Ravens fans, people who cover this team have been dreaming about, where if you continue to surround Lamar Jackson with weapons and just give him all these different options, you're going to have these opposing defenses saying, well, we have to give somewhere. We can't single cover everybody. And if we go to, if they double Mark Andrews, if they double Odell, etc., they're going to have to leave guys one-on-one. And especially early on, I don't think teams are going to say, oh, we have to double Zay Flowers here or send a linebacker to help out on Zay Flowers or send a safety over top. Like, I don't know. I feel like for him, with the way his route running is, my expectations for Zay Flowers, and stat predictions are a whole different side of the story. But since it is expectations, I'll throw just my initial ones in there. I think Zay Flowers, his rookie season, can have anywhere from 50 to 60 catches. Anywhere from 600 to 700, maybe 800 yards, and 800 probably being on the brighter side for him in his rookie year, and then probably anywhere from 4 to 6 touchdowns. I think this is a player that the attention will be off of him. And with the way that if you put a single cover guy, like I would assume the Ravens put him in the slot for most situations. I think the Ravens do like the versatility of being able to, maybe put Rashad Bateman in the slot, put Devin Duvernay there. You can put Odell there too. But I think you want to utilize Zay Flowers in the slot and let him work over the middle of the field. Not that he can't do other things, but to me, my expectation for Zay Flowers is he's going to be an immediate impact player in this offense. And even before the draft, people were saying, well, NFL teams view Zay Flowers as the best receiver in this class. And again, there are a bunch of smoke screens that lead up to the draft. Not everything is going to be, just crystal clear honesty because teams are trying to throw each other off. I know there are rumors about Flowers to the Patriots, Flowers to the Chargers, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like this is a pick that Baltimore can utilize a ton this year. Not a lot can be said in that same vein, though, about some of the other picks, and that's a teaser as to why I feel like this class could be a bit different than the others for the Ravens over the past couple of seasons. But moving on to Trenton Simpson, somebody who I think can make an impact this year, like a big one, but I think will be more of a special teams player early on. You have Roquan Smith, you have Patrick Queen. And one of the good things about Trenton Simpson is that he's not just a middle linebacker. You can play him all over the field if you're the Ravens, but you don't want to overutilize him. I think, again, we've seen this with Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins in Arizona, some of these other positionless players. I would classify Trenton Simpson as positionless, but you don't want to overwork him early. And I think with the Ravens having Smith and Queen, it gives them the luxury not to do that. Now, I think, honestly, where he could have more of an impact, his rookie year could be rushing the passer on the outside. He can play that role. He is explosive in that role. And the Ravens have a guy in Tyus Bowser who you kind of look at what he brings to the table. He's established himself as a pass rusher. That's a big part of his game, but also can drop back into coverage. We've seen him make plays, force turnovers in that role. Trenton Simpson is very fluid in coverage. So while I'm not expecting Trenton Simpson to play a huge role, I'm not giving huge expectations out for him. Maybe a guy with 30 tackles, maybe 1 or 2 sacks. Maybe, if he's used on the outside, maybe I'll bump that number up. But he's someone who's a physical player, and if one of Patrick Queen or Roquan Smith were to go down, hopefully that does not happen, but if that were to be the case, you now have another player who I think you feel confident enough in. Again, he's a rookie, you're throwing him in there, but again, we know how rookies can contribute. We know that round 1, 2, 3, all the way to undrafted guys, they can make impacts, and Trenton Simpson is someone with his versatility. It might take a couple weeks, couple months to kind of figure out. Might take a couple years, honestly, to figure out where Trenton Simpson best fits, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have the ability to make an impact for them. Moving on to Tavius Robinson, rookie year. This one is a little tricky to me because, again, you have Odafe Owe, you have David Ojabo, you have Tyus Bowser. The fourth guy right now for them is Tavius Robinson. Now, that could obviously change over the course of the next couple of weeks, couple of months, depending on how the Ravens view that room and how they add. But Tavius Robinson, to me, let's say, we'll do both scenarios. Let's say first they do add. I would not expect Tavius Robinson, like if they bring in Justin Houston, bring him back. If they bring in Jadeveon Clowney, Yannick Ngakoue, Leonard Floyd, etc., they're not going to need a Tavius Robinson. Now, what they could do with him is kick him inside. And if a couple of defensive linemen go down, he does have the size and the athleticism to play both inside and outside. I project him more outside, but the Ravens can still utilize him in that role. Maybe that's what happens. If they do not bring anybody in, if Houston, all those guys, they decide they're good with what they have, I think Robinson could play a bigger role there. And in fact, he probably will have to. And if one of Ojabo, Owe, Bowser go down, if they're not producing, they might have to rely a bit more on Tavius Robinson, who I do think needs a bit more time to develop. I don't think he's fully there yet. Has the tools, has the traits you kind of drool over if you're an NFL scout, if you're a franchise. But I think it's going to take him a year or so to kind of put those all together at the NFL level. We saw the potential from him at Ole Miss. I think we're going to see it at the NFL level. But to me, he's a guy that maybe, 20 tackles or so, 1.5 sacks, I'll say, maybe 2. Not to say that, again, he can't step up in case of an injury, but it wouldn't be my first choice. In fact, I don't think it'd be in my top 5 choices. But I still think that depending on how the Ravens do that position, maybe he plays a bigger role than anticipated. But coming up in our second segment, we will talk about the remaining 3 draft picks of that Ravens 2023 draft class, their expectations right now for the 2023 season, and a lot more. So be sure to stay tuned. It's still a lot to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now new customers can get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. And as you know, if you've been listening to me for a while here, Denver Nuggets guy. I am, and they're 1 win away from the finals. They play tonight, so if you're watching this after that game, you'll either know if I'm excited or upset about that. But they're 1 win away from the finals. So if you want to bet on the Nuggets, if you want to bet on LeBron James to avoid the sweep, you can do that with FanDuel. They have great promotions every day. It's a safe and secure app, and you can get paid instantly. There's a better place to bet all the action than America's #1 sportsbook and FanDuel. So be sure to bet on that playoff action over there. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostraker still here with you again. Thank you so much for being here with me today on a show. Now we're under 10 episodes until I'm at 1,000 for my Locked On Ravens career. It's crazy to think about. So next Friday will be my 1,000th episode of the show. I've never missed an episode dating back to August of 2019, which is still incredible. Obviously, as I always say, that year was incredible. And my first year covering the Ravens, they went 14-2, best regular season in team history. But coming up on 1,000, it's kind of crazy to think about and reflect on. And I obviously wouldn't be here without the support of everybody listening, watching over the years. So I do it 5 days a week. Again, never missed a show, and it makes it worth it when I have the support that I do. So it really does not go unnoticed. So thank you for that. But back into the Ravens content here. Let's talk about expectations for the final 3 picks. The Ravens only had 6 picks in this 2023 draft. It wasn't like the drafts of years past with 10 picks, 11 picks. And people thought they were gonna to maybe trade out of the first round, get some picks back. But the Ravens they actually trade back in. They trade a 6th round pick for a 7th round pick, 6th in 2024 for a 7th in 2023. They take a guy we'll talk about in a few minutes. But let's first start off with Kyu Blu Kelly, Stanford corner. Now, if you've listened to me, if you're an everydayer, you've heard me say this before, and shout out to all the everydayers here. Huge shout out to you guys. But I've said that I think is kind of a hot take that Kyu Blu Kelly could be the second most impactful rookie for the Ravens this year. I know when people think of that and they say, well, Zay Flowers is, I think, the consensus #1 guy in terms of highest expectations, biggest potential to make an impact for them this year. But second place guy, people might say Trenton Simpson. People might say Tavius Robinson. I say Kyu Blu Kelly because of where the Ravens cornerback room is right now. And again, giving out expectations right now, you have to take into account that this offseason is, far from over. We still have a couple months to go till the regular season starts. So much like the outside linebacker room, maybe there's another guy added there. In the cornerback room, could be another guy added there. A lot of the talk has been about Marcus Peters. They obviously added Rock Ya-Sin a couple weeks ago. So they have been revamping that room. But Kyu Blu Kelly is someone, a 4-year player at Stanford, 2-year starter, someone who is physical. And we know they love those physical corners. Said it when they signed Rock Ya-Sin. Marlon Humphrey is one of the most physical corners in the NFL. Their secondaries has a bunch of physical, they do not mess around type players. And Kyu Blu Kelly is one of those guys. You look at the tape, look at the film and the highlights, and you see that physicality on paper. And, with just the intangibles he has, but also on the tape that he has. So for Kyu Blu Kelly, I think that with the way the room is right now, again, we'll go. Let's say they add Marcus Peters. That room would be Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Rock Ya-Sin as the top 3. But then who are you relying on? Is it Kyu Blu Kelly? Is it a guy like a Pepe Williams or Jalen Armour-Davis or Trayvon Mullen, etc.? I don't know. Maybe Kyu Blu Kelly comes in, makes a huge impact. If they don't, that conversation becomes, well, who's your number 3 guy? Are you playing Kyle Hamilton in the big nickel role in that scenario? Who do you trust in the slot? For Kyu Blu Kelly, is he your 3rd outside guy? Because Rock Ya-Sin is an outside guy. Marlon Humphrey can play inside. I prefer him to play outside. With the experience Kyu Blu Kelly has, he's also around the football, as I've said on the show multiple times. Only, I believe, 3 interceptions at Stanford, very low number, but over 20 plus pass deflections. So that's a player that, sometimes, physical, being around the ball corners don't usually turn those big, pass breakups into turnover. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it does. And there's the potential now for Kyu Blu Kelly to do that. But just with the way this cornerback room is, what happens if Rock Ya-Sin goes down? Even if he doesn't, who are you relying on past Humphrey and Ya-Sin? If Marlon Humphrey goes down, even if they sign Marcus Peters, if they don't make like a Jair Alexander type move, and spoiler, I don't really expect them to. It'd be cool, but I don't expect them to. But if they don't make that kind of move, who's it going to be? If Marlon Humphrey goes down, that room is, I guess, cooked. It's a cooked room at that point. So I don't know. Humphrey and Rock Ya-Sin are your top 2 guys right now, but it's kind of that mishmash of guys below that, Jalen Davis, Pepe Williams, Kyle Blue Kelly, Trayvon Mullen, etc. Brandon Stevens is going to play some safety, or at least more safety. So you kind of look at the corner situation. You don't put him in that conversation anymore. So we'll see what happens there. Then we'll look at Salah Amuve Laulu out of Oregon, their 6th round selection. This is a player that, again, I don't expect a lot from this year. He has all the physical traits, the athletic tools that you love out of offensive linemen. He played tackle. Some people project him inside at guard. I know, when you kind of look at, why do you project somebody inside as opposed to outside? Foot speed can be an issue. Hand placement as well can be an issue. So, if you don't trust a guy to hold an edge, and you'd rather have him. I'm not saying, guard is harder than tackle is harder than guard, but sometimes a guy is just built for a certain specific position. And at the NFL level, with how speedy some guys can be coming off the edge, if foot speed is an issue, those edge defenders will just run right by you. You'll barely hit them, and they'll just run right by you. So I think for the powerfulness of Salah, he's someone that I think can have an impact maybe a couple years down the line, but I just don't see it this year. For him, he will probably be a game day inactive most weeks. I would not be shocked if that were the case. He has talent. He has potential. I'm not trying to bash him. I really don't try to do that, and I'm not trying to do that right now. But the fact of the matter, again, much like Tavius Robinson, I think to a more extensive degree with Salah, and that's not an issue. Again, some guys you draft based off potential, and you look at the tape and you see the imposing will of Salah. He's someone who likes to get out and just road grade people. That's the type of player the Ravens like on their offensive line. I'm not surprised they draft a player like him. But with the offensive line pretty much all set in stone outside of the left guard position, and then you have a couple of solid backups like Patrick McCary, Daniel Falele, etc. Sam Mustafa, who they just recently signed. If I know Bears fans, Bears fans will tell you he's the worst center in the league, but as a backup, hopefully he just doesn't have to play. But regardless, I think Salah's someone who is going to be maybe an asset for them down the line. I just don't have expectations. I don't have a lot in terms of what he can do, how he can play. And I forgot to do Kyle Blue Kelly stats. Kyle Blue Kelly stats. If Marcus Peters comes in, I'll say maybe 28 tackles, 5 pass defense, there may be 4, and an interception or no interceptions. If Peters does not come in, I'll say Kyle Blue Kelly has 35 tackles, 7 passes defensed, and 1 or 2 interceptions. We'll go with that. And then for Salah, obviously offensive lineman, not a lot of stats you can really put out there, but I wouldn't expect him to start any games this year unless in dire emergency situation. That would be the Ravens offensive line has lost almost everybody. I would not expect that. Maybe he gets some snaps at the end of games, but my expectations, not that it's a bad thing for his projected career arc. I just don't think he's going to play a ton this season. Finally, we have Andrew Voorhees. Not a lot of expectations this year for him. In fact, I don't really have any. He's someone who I have very high expectations for next year, assuming he can bounce back from the injury suffered at the combine. But this is going to be, I think, a year process for him. Well, I won't put a timeline on it, but it'll be a long process. And the Ravens will probably put him on PUP, IR, and he won't play this year for them. So kind of short and sweet with Andrew Voorhees, but I love that pick trading back in someone who would have been a 3rd or 4th rounder if he was healthy, and the Ravens get him in the 7th. So extreme value there. But the reason I say that this draft class is maybe a bit different than others, and I think I want to expand on this on a future episode, maybe in a couple weeks or maybe a couple months as we kind of get closer to the season, is the fact that the Ravens don't need huge expectations out of the rookie class this year. They don't need huge stat lines and huge plays from them. Now, of course, any play you get from them this huge is great, right? But it's not like you're relying on it. Whereas Zay Flowers, I think you're relying a bit on him to have a big year, but if he doesn't, Odell can pick up that slack. Rashad Bateman can pick up that slack. You go back now a couple of years. The 2022 draft, Kyle Hamilton is someone that, especially playing that big nickel role, needed to have a huge year. I think for what the Ravens needed from Tyler Linderbaum, especially after losing Bradley Bozeman, they needed him to step up in a huge way. That would have been a huge weakness for them. 2021, Rashad Bateman was someone who obviously you had Marquise Brown there that year, but effectively he was kind of like your de facto number 2 guy and got injured in training camp and had to miss the first couple of games there. And then Odafe Owe in 2021 was someone where the Ravens had some pretty quality, I'd say pretty quality pass rushing depth there, but still you wanted to have a big year from him. Patrick Queen is someone who came in and started at middle linebacker year one for that team. So he's someone who you needed to have big expectations from, and you kind of go down that line. J.K. Dobbins with Mark Ingram and Gus Edwards there. But again, it's not like these rookies, it's for the most part, I'm not saying all the time, but for the most part, first rounders are going to have the highest expectations, right? That's just a given. But then it's where do you need expectations and where do you need plays from your other draft picks? I think in recent years, we've seen the Ravens need some plays from some of their draft picks in the later rounds. But this year, with the way that they drafted, I don't think they need that. And the way their roster is constructed, I just don't think they need that necessarily. So I'm not necessarily expecting huge, like massive collective things from this Ravens draft class, but that's not, I'm really trying to stress it's not a bad thing if that happens, because I think the Ravens roster can, I don't know, withstand, that's probably not the right word, but withstand a not super productive year. And they don't have to play these guys unless it's a huge, like they're down everybody at one position. Again, I think Zay Flowers, Luke Kelly, Trenton Simpson are the three that'll have the biggest roles, not in any particular order there. I think my prediction I said is Flowers, Luke Kelly, and Trenton Simpson. But I think Tavius Robinson could make an impact. I'm not so sure about Saleh and Andrew Voorhees, but we'll see what happens. But those are my expectations for the Ravens 2023 rookie class this year. For now, we'll see if they change in between now and the start of the year, of course. But coming up, lastly here, we'll be talking a bit about OTAs. Will Lamar Jackson attend or not? If you're listening to this after the fact, you know that answer. But we'll also be talking about what to expect and also dive into the importance of them. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to dive into on the show. We're back here, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you. And let's talk OTAs now. Again, I'll read off the dates again. I read them off at the top, but we will do it one more time here, as the Ravens will host their first round of OTAs today, May 22nd. Then they'll have Wednesday, Thursday, May 24th and 25th. And then they'll have May 30th, June 1st and 2nd, June 5th and 6th, and June 8th and 9th. Now, the big story surrounding OTAs is something we talked about in the last episode we did with Qadri Ismail, where we talked about the Ravens and Lamar Jackson and whether Lamar Jackson's showing up, or I guess lack of attendance at football school, was a huge issue. And I said that it wasn't. And Q agreed with me, kind of talking about how, you don't necessarily, for these veterans, it's not a huge, massive deal if they don't show up. This is an opportunity for the young guys, but I think it'd be really cool if he was there, but he wasn't. I'm not making a huge deal about that. Now, some reports have surfaced about whether Lamar will be there today and throughout the course of OTAs. And, the reports have said that, yeah, he'll be there. So we'll see. And again, if you're listening to this after the fact, you know that answer. But if he is there, that's great. Obviously with Todd Monken and the new offense, you want him to be there to kind of help that whole situation, kind of figure out where everything is. But if he doesn't show up, then again, it's okay. It's okay. He has a playbook. He's been working out at home. It's not like he's not doing anything. It's the stuff we discussed on Friday's show. So be sure to check that out with Qadri Ismail. But I think for these veterans here, you're not going to get perfect attendance. Some teams do. Some teams do get perfect attendance. If the Ravens don't, again, it's not a huge deal. These are, again, voluntary. The key word is voluntary. So expectations here, and it's different this year, right? With the new strength coaches and staff. Obviously, Steve Saunders, as Q calls him, F-, is out of the building, and I think that is a great thing. Honestly, should have happened a couple years ago, but what's done is done. So we kind of throw that to the side, but hopefully this will be a program that the players trust a lot more and that won't result in more injuries, especially early offseason or late offseason or early season injuries. The Ravens will be healthier for longer, and every team gets beat up. Every team gets injured. This is the NFL. It happens, and it will happen for the Ravens and every other team. Right now, it just depends on it. Are you going 2021 Ravens, where it's just, every position is decimated? Or is it more of, 2019, they were pretty healthy. 2019 Ravens, where, again, they were relatively healthy for the most part, but had an amazing season. So health can correlate, and I think the strength staff is a huge part of that. And after the Ravens have seemingly gotten that problem out of the building in Steve Saunders, they'll be able to maintain a healthier team for a longer period of time. So I'm excited to see how things kind of shape up, what to take away from it. And there's only so much you can take away from these sorts of things, in these certain practices, especially early on when again, it's more of getting to know, especially for the guys first coming in who weren't at the football school, getting to know the new coaches, the new faces, and for Lamar in particular, just building that camaraderie. If Odell does show up, Odell is obviously, he was at the Preakness on Saturday, and that was pretty cool. He, said, from my new home, referring to Baltimore. So it seems like he's seriously embracing the city and embracing the culture of Baltimore, which is, I don't know. It's really cool to see. And Lamar, obviously, such a popular athlete, has a very, very, talk about big followings on social media and just a polarizing presence. That's who he is. Odell coming to town just makes it all the more star power in the city. And the fact that someone of Odell's stature, of Odell's status, is embracing this city of Baltimore is pretty cool to me. And I think is something that should be noted in terms of, the stuff he said. The stuff he said at the press conference he had was not just him blowing hot air. He truly did mean that. But regardless, building the rapport for Lamar Jackson and Odell, building the rapport for Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers, figuring out what the personnel is going to look like and who he's going to be throwing to in certain situations, how they're going to utilize these guys. And even for the defense, right? Year 2 of Mike Macdonald, year 1 of Todd Monken for offense. So with Mike Macdonald and his unit being able to get these guys in, there's not a ton of turnover on that defense, all things considered. I mean, Calais Campbell is gone. Chuck Clark is gone. Marcus Peters is not there right now. But other than that, you didn't really lose a lot of guys there. I think, the Ravens will feel the loss of Calais Campbell. I think Chuck Clark, depending on how the Ravens plan to utilize safeties this year, will be a different story. But we'll see. So OTAs, I think, are an important part of the offseason. My preference, and I'm sure a lot of others, the organizations obviously, is for 100% attendance. But it's pretty unrealistic nowadays. You get that. Some teams do, and maybe the Ravens will get it this year. But it does feel like with the practices, they're not just going to be, la-di-da, like walking around, running around, just chilling. They're going to be working. And this is what this team does, right? They are a hardworking team. I know the Ravens have not had a ton of playoff success over the last decade plus, but they work hard. They try. Of course, every team should try. That's how it is. But the Ravens truly have that businessman mindset, and that helps them. I mean, I go back to, was it 2019 or 2020? I can't remember which one, but 2019, it was all about going out there and trying to win the Super Bowl. Obviously, they came up short, but I do think that this team, the way it is built, the way the roster is constructed, still some holes. I'm not saying it's a perfect roster. I would love another corner. I'd love another outside linebacker, a couple other maybe minor needs, minor positions. But at the same time, I don't know. I said this on the Locked On NFL show I did for today. I can't put my finger on it, but this Ravens team feels like they could do something special. Obviously there's a long way to go until the Super Bowl and until February. We're not even talking about that right now, but the goal for this team is obviously to win a Super Bowl. They kind of, it's such a weird thing to say because they didn't necessarily push all their chips in to the point where their future is sold and it's like the Rams where there's nothing left for them. But they did make a couple of moves that, we haven't seen before. The Odell deal with the void years, that's something we haven't seen the Ravens do. Lamar extension is huge for them, and that's why I say, their future is still there. As long as Lamar is there and he's playing at a high level, they have a shot. But giving out some void years, some, huge guaranteed chunks to Odell in that deal as well, they're pushing some chips in. And while they might lose a couple here and there if they don't make it to where they want to go, it's not like it's this year or bust. They still have opportunities, and we'll see. The OTAs could be the start of something special, so we'll see there. I also want to take a moment as we wrap up the show to talk a little bit about the tragic passing of Chuck, a Ravens fan, a diehard Ravens fan, who I know touched a lot of people in the tragic passing that happened over the weekend. Mental health is no joke, and I give my condolences, my prayers, my thoughts to his family, his loved ones. He leaves behind 2 beautiful children, and it's just a tragic, a sad situation all around. He and I interacted a few times, not a ton, but it's definitely something that has shocked the Ravens community, the NFL community. And, there's just stuff like that. You never know what someone's going through. So be sure to check up on your loved ones, your friends or family members. And, if you're struggling, if you're having, trouble dealing with things, difficulty, you can reach out to me on Twitter. I'm more than happy. I know people view, some of these, he has all these followers and he'll never respond. I really try to get to everybody. And if you're struggling, I'm more than happy to help and talk you through. And also, prevention hotlines and all those types of things. Resources are there for you. And, it's a tragic and horrible situation. And again, all my thoughts, prayers, and condolences go out to Chuck's friends, family members, loved ones, and, all that cared about him. And it's something that, has gotten national attention. And I hope that for everybody involved, they are, able to look at the happy moments with him. But I know it's just a tragic situation all around. So I just wanted to comment on that and, talk about it a little bit. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here tomorrow, more Ravens content. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And I'll see you right back here tomorrow.